Every summer, flat raised beds leave gardeners battling parched soil and mounting costs, while right next door, a 5-foot mound overflows with lush crops, untouched by hoses or fertilizer. Why did we abandon Irrigation, a centuries-old German method that grows food from a buried subterranean sponge, generating internal heat and feeding plants for up to 20 years with almost no effort? After World War II, powerful new industries and agricultural experts erased this self-sustaining system, recasting it as peasant superstition. What did we lose? And who actually benefited when the lazy garden was forced underground? The answers start with the struggle in our own backyards. Across neighborhoods and rural backyards, the promise of the modern raised bed is everywhere. Neat rectangles of lumber filled with bagged soil, lined up like tidy soldiers. Yet beneath this order lies a hidden struggle. Flat beds, by design, shed water almost as quickly as they receive it. After a rain, moisture drains away, leaving soil dry and roots gasping. Within days, gardeners reach for hoses, pouring gallons onto the beds just to keep plants alive. In hot weather, the cycle accelerates, water evaporates, nutrients leach out, and the soil shrinks and cracks. Each season brings another round of expenses, fresh compost, chemical fertilizers, and endless bags of replacement soil. For the average homeowner, these costs add up fast. The Environmental Protection Agency estimates that outdoor irrigation accounts for nearly 1/3 of all residential water use in the United States. In some regions, summer water bills double, driven by the relentless thirst of flat garden beds. Meanwhile, nutrients vanish with every storm. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are flushed out, forcing gardeners into a yearly ritual of replenishment. The soil itself grows tired, demanding more inputs to produce the same harvest. The result? A system that locks gardeners into a treadmill of labor and expense, where every tomato or bean is paid for twice, first at the tap and again at the garden center. All this, while a centuries-old solution sits quietly in the margins. Why did we abandon a Germanic gardening technique that acts as a subterranean water tower, generates its own heat, and fertilizes itself for 20 years with zero tilling? The answer begins with a single word: Irrigation. The word itself carries a sense of both curiosity and practicality. Irrigation, in German, simply means mound culture or hill culture. For centuries, rural gardeners across Central and Eastern Europe shaped their land into raised mounds, piling up logs, branches, and yard debris before covering everything with soil. It was not until 1962 that the method received its modern name. That year, German gardener Hermann Andra published a small booklet, inspired by the wild abundance he saw on a pile of woody debris in his grandmother's garden. Andra argued that this was no accident. Nature itself was showing how to transform waste wood into a thriving, self-sustaining garden bed. Irrigation was not just a clever trick. It was a direct challenge to the flat, input-hungry beds that had become the norm. The mound's buried wood acted as a subterranean sponge, soaking up rainfall and holding it deep beneath the surface. Over time, as the wood broke down, it became a biological battery, releasing nutrients slowly, year after year. Andra's booklet gave this old-world practice a modern identity, connecting the wisdom of past generations to a new era of gardening. The name stuck, and with it, the promise of a garden that waters and feeds itself. A lazy garden, but only in the best sense of the word. With the term Irrigation, the solution had a name, a story, and a set of instructions that anyone could follow. Now, the question was not just how it worked, but why so many had forgotten it. Deep beneath the surface of a Irrigation mound, something remarkable happens every time it rains. Picture a buried log, not as a dead weight, but as a living sponge. The wood's porous network, tiny capillaries and hollow vessels once used to carry sap, now draws water inward, holding it in countless microscopic chambers. This is more than just a pile of rotting timber. It is a subterranean water vault, quietly soaking up rainfall and storing it for the driest part of summer. The science behind this is both simple and profound. Wood, even after it is cut, remains riddled with microscopic tubes and air pockets. When buried and surrounded by soil, these channels act like capillary straws, pulling moisture deep into the core. Over days and weeks, the log swells, trapping water that would otherwise vanish into the ground or evaporate from the surface. Roots from above chase this hidden reservoir, tapping into the stored supply long after the last storm has passed. Gardeners have long compared this to a sponge, but the metaphor barely does it justice. Unlike a kitchen sponge that dries out overnight, a well-buried log can hold water for months, releasing it slowly as plants need it. Yet for all its promise, there is a lingering question: just how much water can a mound like this really hold? No one has measured the gallons per log or tracked the exact days a garden survives without rain. The claim hangs in the air, waiting for proof. Still, the sponge hypothesis remains at the heart of hugelkultur's quiet power, a theory built on the hidden architecture of wood and the hope that nature's design can outlast the hose. Every hugelkultur mound begins with a trench, shallow or deep, depending on your soil and ambition. In sandy ground, the standard is about 2 feet down, wide enough to fit a row of logs or thick branches. This buried core is the backbone of the system. Untreated hardwood, oak, maple, or ash lasts the longest, sometimes feeding the soil for 2 decades. Softwoods like pine or spruce will break down faster, offering a quick boost but a shorter lifespan. Never use treated lumber or painted wood because chemicals leach into the soil and can harm your crops. Next comes the nitrogen blanket. This layer is essential: a thick quilt of grass clippings, fresh manure, kitchen scraps, or shredded cardboard. The reason is simple. As wood decomposes, it draws nitrogen from its surroundings, and without this green layer, your garden could starve in the first year. The carbon-to-nitrogen ratio matters here. Too much woody material without enough greens, and you risk a nutrient drought for your plants. Think of this layer as the fuel that jumpstarts the biological battery deep inside the mound. With the core and blanket in place, it is time to build upward. Pile on topsoil and finished compost, shaping the mound into a steep hill. 3 feet high is standard, but taller mounds create even more vertical growing space. The sides should be steep, almost at the edge of crumbling, to maximize surface area. This shape is not just for show. More slope means more microclimates: sunny faces for tomatoes and squash, shadier slopes for lettuce and herbs. The mound's height and shape help shed excess rain while channeling moisture down into the woody heart, where it is stored for the dry months ahead. A word of caution: not all wood is safe. Avoid black walnut, which releases juglone, a natural herbicide toxic to many plants. Stay away from diseased logs or those riddled with insects to prevent spreading pests or pathogens into your garden. If you are in an area prone to termites or carpenter ants, keep the mound at least a few feet from wooden structures. When finished, the mound is a living machine. The buried wood acts as a subterranean sponge. The nitrogen blanket balances decomposition, and the topsoil shell creates a fertile skin ready for planting. Each layer serves a purpose, working together to capture rain, generate heat, and feed plants with a slow, steady drip of nutrients. No hoses, no chemical fertilizers, no tilling. Just a hill of abundance built from the cast-offs of yard and kitchen, ready to outlast the hottest summer. Inside every hugelkultur mound, the real work begins where sunlight never reaches. The buried wood, packed tightly beneath layers of nitrogen-rich greens and fertile topsoil, doesn't just hold water. It transforms the entire logic of drought resilience. Each log is a relic of the forest, its structure riddled with countless tiny channels once used to move sap. Now these capillaries pull in rainfall, trapping it deep below the surface. This is capillarity in action. Water wicks through the wood's microscopic tubes, drawn by invisible forces, and stays locked away long after the garden above has dried out. Roots sense this hidden supply and drive downward, weaving through the mound in search of moisture. In the heat of summer, while flatbeds wilt and crack, a hugelkultur mound quietly releases its reserves. The difference is not just in how much water is stored, but in how long the supply lasts. Where a modern raised bed might dry out in days, the mound's woody core can feed plants for weeks, sometimes months, without a single drop from a hose. Gardeners who have built these mounds in arid climates report lush growth through entire heat waves, relying only on the rain that fell in spring. But water is only half the story. As the wood breaks down, a second transformation unfolds. Microbes and fungi move in, launching a slow-motion feast. Their activity generates heat, a steady, gentle warmth that radiates outward from the mound's heart. This is the biological furnace at work, a byproduct of decomposition that keeps the soil above several degrees warmer than the surrounding ground. In practical terms, this means seeds can germinate weeks earlier in the spring, and harvests can stretch deeper into the fall. The mound becomes a microclimate engine, buffering plants from cold snaps and extending the growing season without any plastic tunnels or electric heaters. No one has published exact temperature charts or water retention curves for hugelkultur, but the pattern is clear across gardens and climates. Where others haul hoses and spread fertilizers, the mound's internal architecture quietly does the work, storing water, releasing heat, and creating a stable environment for roots to thrive. Each layer, wood, greens, soil, plays a part in this underground symphony, turning a pile of waste into a self-regulating system built to outlast drought and deliver abundance with almost no intervention. A hugelkultur mound is more than a clever shortcut for saving water. It is a living reservoir of fertility, built to feed plants for years on end. Deep inside, the buried logs break down at their own slow pace, releasing nutrients bit by bit, like a drip system set by nature. This is the 20-year nutrient drip that gardeners whisper about, a supply so steady that many never need to fertilize again. The mound's core, especially if made from dense hardwood, can persist for a decade or more, quietly shrinking as it feeds the ecosystem above. Each year, the mound settles a little, a silent record of the wood's slow transformation into rich, black soil. The payoff is not just hidden underground. The geometry of the mound itself changes the rules of what a garden can be. Instead of a flat rectangle, a hugelkultur bed rises 3 feet or more, with steep, sloping sides that nearly double the available planting area. Take a standard 4 by 8 foot bed, shaped into a mound. It offers almost twice the surface for crops, more room for roots, more space for leaves, more harvest from the same footprint. This 3-dimensional design creates a patchwork of microclimates. The sun-facing slope is perfect for heat-loving tomatoes and squash, while the shaded side stays cool enough for lettuce and spinach through the hottest days of summer. Even the very top, the crest of the mound, dries out first, making it ideal for Mediterranean herbs that cannot stand wet feet. The long, slow decay of the wood at the core means that the mound's fertility changes over time. In the first year or two, as the nitrogen-rich layer feeds the hungry logs, the mound bursts with crops that crave nutrients: corn, cucumbers, cabbages, tomatoes. As the years pass and the wood softens, the mound shifts to favor beans, peas, and strawberries, which thrive on less. This natural succession is not a flaw, but a feature. The mound evolves, supporting a rotating cast of crops as its chemistry matures. This is not just about saving labor, though there is plenty of that. It is about building a garden that works with time instead of against it, a system that captures abundance from decay and turns every inch of surface into productive ground. The mound's surface area and nutrient drip are the quiet engines of its success, offering a blueprint for how to grow more with less for decades. The next layer of the story lies even deeper, where roots and fungi begin to trade secrets beneath the soil. Beneath the soil, in the heart of every hugelkultur mound, an invisible network comes alive. This is where wood and earth become more than just materials, they become habitat. As logs and branches begin to soften and break apart, they open a labyrinth of tiny tunnels and crevices, perfect for colonization by fungi. These are not just any fungi, they are mycorrhizal fungi, soil's master connectors, weaving a living web that stretches from one root tip to the next, linking plants into a silent, subterranean community. The process starts quietly. Spores drift in on the wind or travel with soil, landing on the decaying wood. Once established, the fungal hyphae, thread-like filaments thinner than a human hair, fan out in all directions. They slip between soil particles, wrap around roots, and burrow deep into the log's porous chambers. What looks like rot to the untrained eye is actually the foundation of a biological superhighway. Through these threads, nutrients flow: phosphorus, potassium, and trace minerals scavenged from wood and stone, delivered straight to hungry roots in exchange for a trickle of plant sugars. This partnership is not a side effect, it is the engine of low-input fertility. In a Hügelkultur mound, the buried wood acts as both sponge and scaffold, hosting a dense network of mycorrhizal fungi that would be shattered by tillage in a conventional bed. Here, the network survives year after year, growing stronger as the mound matures. The result is a system that does not depend on chemical fertilizer or weekly compost tea. Instead, the mound's fungal infrastructure mines nutrients from the decaying core, trading them with plant roots in a quiet, constant exchange. Soil ecologists have long marveled at the efficiency of these networks. A single gram of healthy soil can contain several kilometers of hyphae, all working in tandem to move water and minerals where they are needed most. In Hügelkultur, the wood's slow decay means fresh habitat is created season after season, supporting a living infrastructure that rivals the complexity of a forest floor. This is the secret behind the mound's reputation for resilience. When drought strikes or nutrients run low, the mycorrhizal network steps in, sustaining growth long after a modern bed would falter. What happens underground is easy to overlook, but in Hügelkultur, it is the difference between a garden that constantly demands and one that quietly provides. The mycorrhizal superhighway, born from wood, fueled by decay, and maintained by the absence of tillage, turns a simple mound of debris into a self-sustaining ecosystem. It is a living memory of how forests feed themselves, now harnessed for the backyard or the homestead, ready to deliver abundance with almost no outside help. In the years after World War II, the quiet world of backyard gardening collided with the machinery of industry. Across Germany and much of Europe, chemical giants like BASF and Bayer faced a crossroads. Their factories, once dedicated to producing explosives and synthetic materials for the war effort, now stood ready for a new mission. The answer came in the form of nitrogen, an element as essential to crops as it was to munitions. With the war over, these plants pivoted almost overnight, flooding the market with cheap synthetic fertilizer. Archival records from BASF's Ludwigshafen plant and Bayer's Leverkusen complex show production lines once reserved for ammonia-based explosives now churning out ammonium nitrate and urea, destined for fields and gardens instead of battlefields. The chemistry was simple, but the effect was profound. For the first time, a bag of fertilizer could deliver more nitrogen in a single season than a mound of rotting wood might release over a decade. Gardeners who had relied on compost, manure, and the slow decay of buried logs found themselves outpaced by a powder that promised instant results. Agricultural bulletins and company pamphlets from the late 1940s and early 1950s boasted of record harvests, lush lawns, and effortless abundance, all thanks to a dash of white crystals dissolved in a watering can. This industrial pivot set off a cascade of changes. The new fertilizers worked best in flat, uniform beds, exactly the kind that could be tilled, planted, and harvested by machine. The old mounds, with their uneven shapes and hidden wood cores, did not fit the logic of mechanized agriculture. Extension agents and gardening magazines promoted the clean lines of the modern raised bed, backed by the promise of chemistry. Meanwhile, the quiet genius of Hügelkultur, its subterranean sponge and slow-release biological battery, faded into the background. The garden was no longer a place for patience and decay, but a showcase for speed and control, fueled by the surplus of a repurposed war industry. A flat garden bed invites the machine. That was the logic behind the post-war rush to mechanize, and it shaped every tool that followed. By the 1950s, the rototiller had become the centerpiece of home gardening. Manuals from that era spell out the rules: never use on slopes greater than 10 degrees, always operate on level ground, and avoid obstacles like rocks, roots, or uneven soil. The reason is simple: The spinning tines and heavy engine cannot grip a shifting hill. On a Hügelkultur mound, with its steep sides and uneven crest, a tiller bucks and stalls, its blades catching on buried wood and tumbling debris. Even a small garden tractor, designed for smooth rectangles, is useless here. The wheels slip, the chassis tips, and the operator risks a spill. Equipment operators learned this the hard way. In demonstration plots, early adopters tried coaxing their rototillers up the side of a 3-foot mound. The result was always the same: a cloud of dust, a sputtering engine, and a machine stuck halfway up the slope. The mound's geometry, so perfect for capturing rain and creating microclimates, was a nightmare for machines built to plow flat rows. Every manual from the era echoes the same warning for safety and efficiency: keep your beds level and your soil loose. Hügelkultur, with its buried logs and layered debris, was the opposite of what mechanized gardening demanded. This was not just a technical detail. The rise of the machine garden brought with it a new set of cultural expectations. Neat, flat beds signaled progress and modernity. Sloping, woody mounds looked unruly, out of step with the clean lines of post-war suburbia. The physical mismatch between mound and machine became a social one too. As equipment grew more powerful and affordable, the old ways started to look not just impractical, but out of place. Hügelkultur did not just resist the tiller, it resisted the entire story that modern gardening wanted to tell. In the years after the war, the garden became a battleground for ideas as much as for crops. Across the United States and Europe, a new language took hold, one that prized uniformity, speed, and chemical certainty. Gardening pamphlets from the 1950s, distributed by extension services and fertilizer companies, promised a future free from the unpredictability of nature. Their covers showed tidy rectangles of tilled earth, gloved hands scattering granules, and slogans like, "Feed your soil, feed your family." Beneath the surface, a subtler message ran through the text. Old world mounds belonged to an era of scarcity and superstition. The word peasant was used as a warning, not a compliment. This shift was not just cultural, it carried a real ecological cost. As tillers churned through garden plots, the living web of mycorrhizal fungi, those hidden superhighways connecting roots and nutrients, was torn apart each spring. USDA soil studies from the era charted the rapid loss of organic matter and the fragmentation of fungal networks in tilled beds. Without these fungal bridges, plants lost their most efficient partners in mining the soil for minerals and water. The annual cycle of tilling, irrigating, and fertilizing became entrenched, locking gardeners into a pattern of dependence that the old mounds had quietly avoided for centuries. Not everyone accepted this new order. In the margins of extension bulletins, a few dissenting agronomists raised concerns about the long-term health of soils under constant tillage. Some pointed to the resilience of fungal-rich, undisturbed earth, often found in places where mound-building traditions lingered. But these voices were drowned out by a chorus of modernity. The result was a kind of cultural seal. Hügelkultur and its kin were quietly erased from mainstream advice, their benefits dismissed as folklore or inefficiency. The memory of the mound and the living networks it supported faded from public view, buried beneath a new model of progress that left the soil and its gardeners a little more alone each year. Summer droughts have a way of rewriting the rules for every gardener. In places where lawns once drank freely from the hose, water restrictions now arrive with the first heat wave. Utility bills climb, sometimes doubling in a single season, and the patchwork of raised beds that once promised abundance becomes a source of stress. The Environmental Protection Agency puts a number to the struggle. Nearly 1/3 of all household water use in the United States goes to outdoor irrigation. In the Southwest, that share can reach over half. For many, the cost is no longer just financial. It is a question of whether a garden can survive at all. In the midst of these pressures, a quiet revival is underway. Homesteaders and suburban gardeners, faced with shrinking water budgets, are turning back to a method that their grandparents or their grandparents' neighbors once relied on. Hügelkultur, the old, lazy garden, is finding new life in the age of water scarcity. What draws them in is not nostalgia, but hard numbers. Reports from modern practitioners show that after the first year, a well-built mound can go weeks, sometimes months, without a drop from the tap. One homesteader in Central Texas tracked her water bills through 2 record-breaking summers. After switching from flatbeds to hugelkultur, her irrigation costs dropped by more than 60%. The savings did not just show up in the ledger. Her tomatoes, once parched by July, now set fruit into September. Beans and squash thrived through weeks when neighbors' gardens wilted. For some, the memory of mound gardening never faded. An older German gardener in Wisconsin remembers her father building Hugelkultur beds in the 1950s, long before the word was common in America. She recalls the way the mounds held their green through the driest spells, how the soil stayed cool and damp beneath a crust of mulch. Now, as water grows precious again, she watches younger gardeners rediscover what was nearly lost. The urgency is new, but the lesson is old. When every drop counts, the wisdom of the mound comes back into focus. Hugelkultur is not just a relic. It is a practical answer to the modern question of how to grow food without being chained to a hose or a fertilizer bag. The solution is buried in plain sight, waiting for anyone willing to stack logs, pile up debris, and reclaim a garden that waters itself. A hugelkultur mound doesn't require a tractor, a chemistry set, or a trip to the lumberyard. With a few hours and what most yards already offer, anyone can build a living water battery that will keep their garden green long after the hose runs dry. Start with a patch of ground at least 4 by 8 feet, about the size of a standard raised bed. If your soil is sandy or drains quickly, dig a trench about 2 feet deep. In heavier soils, a shallow trench or even building right on the surface works fine. Gather your materials before you begin. You will need untreated logs and thick branches for the core. Hardwood lasts the longest, but any non-toxic, non-treated wood will work. Avoid black walnut, yew, locust, or anything that has been painted or pressure treated. Next, collect a generous pile of nitrogen-rich greens, grass clippings, fresh manure, kitchen scraps, or shredded cardboard. For the outer shell, use topsoil and finished compost. Keep a wheelbarrow or tarp handy for moving soil. Safety comes first. Wear gloves to protect your hands from splinters and sharp edges. If you are using large logs, lift with your legs and get help for anything too heavy. Never use wood that has been chemically treated, common in old fences or landscaping timbers, as those toxins leach into your food. In some areas, local fire codes or neighborhood rules may limit the size or placement of woody debris piles. Check with your city or county if you are unsure. Begin by filling the trench with logs, placing the biggest pieces at the bottom. Pack smaller branches and sticks tightly around them, creating as few air gaps as possible. Cover the wood with your nitrogen blanket, tucking greens into every crevice. This layer is the fuel for the biological battery. Without it, the mound's core can rob plants of nitrogen in the first year. Once the core is snug, mound soil and compost over the top, shaping a steep hill about 3 feet high. The steeper the sides, the more surface you gain for planting. Pat the soil down gently, but do not compact it too hard. A finished mound can be built in an afternoon. Water it well to settle the layers and help decomposition begin. If you are planting right away, choose crops that love rich soil. Tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, and corn thrive in the first year. As the mound ages, beans and strawberries will take over. Over time, your mound will gently sink as the wood breaks down, feeding your soil for years to come. With each rain, the subterranean sponge fills, and your garden's water battery quietly recharges. No hoses, no fertilizer bags, no tilling required. Today, droughts deepen and chemical costs soar, yet the blueprint for a self-watering, self-feeding garden, hugelkultur, remains buried just beneath our feet. Its subterranean sponge, biological battery, and 20-year nutrient drip were never obsolete, just overwritten. As climate instability grows, the question is no longer why mound culture disappeared, but how quickly we relearn what nature perfected. Sometimes, the most radical solution is to remember. What would you grow if your garden watered itself?